So where did this come from? The entire time, the Catholic Church has known that this little snare of Sunday is what keeps Protestants under the umbrella of Rome, whether they know it, like it, or not.
You don't always have to know you're deceived to be deceived.
Most people don't.
That's why it's a deception.
Exactly. And it's still striking to me that, like, you bring this up to most people, Christian or not, and they're just like, why do you care about a day? Like, who cares about a day? And here, that's the nature of the deception. That's the part of the problem. Welcome back to another episode of the Truth Matters podcast. I'm Matthew Shawnshea, here again with Mackenzie Drebbett. How you doing, Mackenzie?
I'm good.
Well, he's still a little bit under the weather, but he's working through. So we appreciate everyone's prayers and helping us get through this next episode. Before we do, we want to just touch on a couple things. We told you last episode that we were blocked out of uploading on YouTube for several weeks. And we are going to be seriously increasing our efforts to migrate all of our viewers over to adtv.watch, where you can do a lot more than you can do on YouTube. It's been designed to help you guys not only process this information, but share the information and categorize it and organize it in a way that can help people.
Yeah, make sure that you create a login, and then you'll be able to get messages from us if there's any updates, new material. And then you'll be able to use all the different study tools, especially the new ones that are coming out really shortly. We also have a new Roku app, and we have our smart TV apps that are coming out really soon. So you just put it on your smart TV, and then you have all of ADTV Watch right there. And also, we want to invite you to our camp meeting that is taking place this August 21st to the 27th. We're going to have some great speakers there. It's going to be really nice. Go to the website, campmeeting.amazingdiscoveries.org, and register so that you can have your spot saved.
And it's going to be a special one because Barbara O'Neill is going to be here in person, Randy Skeet here in person, Scott Meyer here in person, and Matt and Mackenzie here in person. Because I know people are thinking, oh, are they going to do it remote? Are they going to Zoom them in? No, we are all going to be here in person. If you are a follower or a listener to any of those speakers, I know a lot of people would just love to meet Barbara and hear more of her stories and get a chance to actually interact. That will all happen here at AD's property this August. We ask you, if you're going to register for the event, please only register if you're coming in person. Last year we had some issues with people who thought they needed to register to get the links and stuff. If you're going to register, it means that you're going to come in person. If you're not, you can still get most of our material. There will be some practicals that we're going to be doing on site that you won't be able to participate in, so we really encourage, if you can come, please do, because we don't know what changes over the next few years, if we're even going to be able to do this stuff in person, especially with the health crisis over the last few years. So we're really grateful that God's allowed a space for us to do this. Please come join us. It's going to be an amazing experience. So, picking up for where we left off in the last episode, we really tackled what this whole sun worship system was about. Again, looking at through the lens of what God feels, not how we independently feel about it. This is kind of bringing any individual who's learning this for the first time at a crossroads. Because if you haven't known about this your whole life, or nobody's taught you or shown you what the scriptures actually say, then, God's not going to blame you for not knowing. But once you do know, you're confronted with a choice. And this is what we're going to continue and kind of pick up where we left off. So I'm going to kind of run through a couple of points that we looked at last time just to catch people up. If you missed the last one, please go back and check it out because it's kind of a continuation. So we saw that it's clear that the most abominable thing in ancient Israel, that through God's eyes, was sun worship. And it involved not just, regular sun worship among, the Canaanites and the Moabites and other outside Israelite groups of people. We saw that the sun worship was happening amongst people who look like God's people, even priests of God in the inner court with their backs towards the temple, worshiping the sun. We saw the origins go back all the way to Babylon and Nimrod, which is interesting because the final system of Earth's history is called Mystery Babylon.
Yep.
So it's one thread, and this thread is kind of identified by the worship of the sun, as we looked at through the lineage of sun worship through all the cultures. And it's in this that sun worship takes all these titles that God takes and owns, and it also is a system that says it's going to be the way to eternal life, which we see is in direct contrast to the Bible saying, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, the life. Yep. So these two contrasting systems are battling each other throughout time. And the hallmark system, the hallmark sign of this system of Babylon always has been the worship and adoration of the sun. So we see prior cultures and belief systems all stem back to this one source. Even what seem like more ancient cultures, when you look at the very beginnings of provable history in those cultures, you find they were worshiping the sun gods. So now we're going to take it one step further and start looking at the one organization that is responsible for Christianizing this sun worship. And I think we can be bold enough to say that it is the modern day priesthood of the sun god and their mark of authority. Well, we're going to take a look at that. And this modern day priesthood, who is that, Mackenzie?
Well, this and what we're talking about is the transition from all those ancient mystery religions, mystery Babylon, to a more modern day Christianized version, which is encapsulated under the Roman Catholicism religion.
Mm-hmm. And so for people who say, well, how do you know that? Let's just take a look and walk through some pictures that we have kind of showing, again, we could do just like two or three episodes just on all the sun worship symbols and use of the sun worship symbols within Roman Catholicism. So let's first look at our current Pope. Here's Pope Francis. And you'll notice that he's holding this
monstrance.
Yeah, this artifact that's just a full display of the solar rays. And you can actually see, if you look closely, there's a difference in interspersing between one ray and another. And we'll look closer at that here in a second. In the last episode, we said there's actually two forms of solar rays, one a male version, one a female version, because a lot of what we're seeing here is involving the reproductive process.
Right.
It's actually impregnating the womb, which would sit at the middle of this. And we see that it's not just Pope Francis. We see John Paul and Ratzinger and all of these past popes, and we can keep going back and back. And they all are dealing with symbols that are adorations of the sun. Always, there's even other symbols, the Maltese cross, the Dagon fish miter, all of these things pointing to this conglomeration of pagan symbolism that is carried out by the priests of this pagan priesthood, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise for people who look at history, because before papal Rome, we had pagan Rome. And so it's just kind of rolled over through Constantine's various edicts and instilling of sun worship and Christianity as this kind of national religion. But now this has been carried over, and sun worship symbols exist in every single Catholic cathedral in the world. You can't go into a single one without finding at least one. Here we see a coin minted. This is Pope Pius XI. And you see on the back, you have the solar disk going into the cup. In the center of this is the IHS logo. And who carries that IHS logo?
Well, that spans a couple things, but the Jesuits specifically.
Yeah, exactly. And the Jesuits have this IHS. Normally, they would say that it is in relation to Jesus. Mm-hmm. But we see
Iesus hominum salvato is what they say the meaning is for the open people, but the initiated, and in the background of how this all came to be, it's something a little bit different.
Exactly. They say it means Jesus, Savior of mankind, essentially, but we know that this is standing for Isis, Horus, Set. Yeah. At least on some level, this is an homage back to the Egyptian Trinity, which is really Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz all over again. And you'll notice that it's always in the adoration of the sun. So this one's a little bit easier to see the difference between the solar rays. So you have three straight waves lines, and then one wavy line amongst every 3 lines. And you'll notice the straight lines are I think I'm getting this right, it's one or the other, but the straight lines are the male, and the wavy lines are the female. And you see these are all impregnating the solar disk here. And here we see is the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the centerpiece of the Mass. And we're not going to go too deep into the Eucharist today, but this is exactly the type of ceremony that you would see being carried out by the pagan priests of old, where they are using symbols like this. And in fact, the first one we saw that the Pope's holding, that thing's got to be worth, a couple $1,000,000 by the time you look at all the precious jewels, and that it's probably pure gold. That these things, is that what Jesus was using? Is that what he was doing during his time? Did he tell the apostles to be adorned in this kind of material?
No, he was promoting a simple life and not spending all the extravagance. It said that he didn't even have a place to lay his head.
And so it's kind of in contrast. Now, we're not saying, the papacy demonizes wealth. We see Jesus didn't really care. It just makes it harder when you're uber wealthy because you're so easily drawn into the snares of the devil. But this Eucharist is really just the plunging of the solar disk, which is represented by the wafer. And if you notice in the middle there, it's plunged into a crescent moon, which we saw in the last episode on a lot of the old reliefs from ancient Assyria and Persia, and even all the way back to Babylon. You can find reliefs with this solar disk and the crescent moon. We see that also in Islam today, the star and the sickle moon. And so when they're plunging this Eucharist, this round wafer, it's essentially a sexual ceremony between the pagan priest and the sun god. And then you have that disc. Actually the moon is representing like the womb. And then you have the disc, and they take that and they say that this is the literal body, and partaking basically of that newborn child. Which is out of that sun and moon symbols. Right. And they say through transubstantiation, they're able to bring the body and blood of Christ into it, re-sacrificing the Son of God every time they do the Mass, and then eating in a cannibalistic manner, in that case, the literal body and blood, when we know what Jesus was talking about was eating and drinking of the Word of God, the Old and New Testament, and being refreshed by the wisdom that's contained in there, and they've just taken it off the tracks in a totally different direction. We see again, we saw that the bull with the sun, kind of hearkening back to Aaron and the ancient Israelites after the Exodus story. And we see again the sickle moon and star used over and over again. Even on the far right, you'll see the Islamic temple, and then on the far right, the Roman Catholic altar with Mary and the solar disk inside of that. So again, using symbols really helps us determine the source of where things come from. And we could go on and on and on showing this symbolism from the priesthood and the Catholic properties of today, tracing back to these ancient cultures. Here is St. Bernini's canopy in Rome, and it's probably one of the greatest collection of pagan symbols in the world. I know you've been to the Vatican. I've been. You've been more recently than I have. I was much younger, so I didn't really understand what I was looking at. But when you walk in and see these types of things, it's the fullness of all of the pagan symbolism. You can see the serpent wrapping around each pillar. On the inside, at the very top, is the eagle, or it could be the phoenix that we've seen so many times in the solar disk with the solar rays around it. And then even when you go straight back through the canopy and you look at the center of what's at Peter's altar, there is one of the most amazing looking sun symbols that may exist in the world. I mean, if it weren't so evil, it'd almost be beautiful. And we see here a closer up view of what this sun symbol looks like. And then, since they removed the second commandment and they can have idols everywhere, you see these childlike angels all over the place, which is very popular. And I actually was told by a former practicing Catholic why they said that they have the right to remove the second commandment is because they said in the holy place and most holy place, and actually it was specifically the most holy place, that there are idols in there because of the two cherub that are sitting
on
there.
On
the altar in the mercy seat, right? And so, but what I find interesting about that is you are taking something that God he prescribed. He wrote it out. He told you what was the cherub were and what they're for.
Yeah.
And then they just ran with it to make a whole system where you can walk by certain statues and their whole foot's missing because it's rubbed off in worship so much.
Well, there's a big difference between using these symbols and worshiping actual graven images, which is the whole method behind Catholicism, is there's actually veneration in them, right?
Yeah.
Which that was not the point in the old sanctuary system. You weren't idolizing the emblems. They were symbols, a type of the literal. So very different connotation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those cherub were protecting God's law, which they changed God's law. So again, going back and just seeing that there are so many sun worship symbols in this system that we could just go on and on and on. Here it's the solar disk behind Mary. Who's being adorned in this? Jesus or Mary?
Mary.
Yeah. So again, it's this, and the Mary in the Catholic system is not the Mary of the Bible. We're dealing with the Queen of Heaven, which was identified as Semiramis and Isis and Ishtar, and going all the way through. And her paganized or Christianized version of the pagan deity today is unfortunately Mary, who's been used now as intercessor. And in fact, gosh, we've got so many clips of the Pope talking about if you have a problem, go to Mary. Even in Catholic writings, they say if you go to Mary, she'll present her breast to suckle Jesus to calm him from his fury and wrath. Yeah. So Mary's this intercessor between Christ and his people, which is also described at length in the Bible, talking about how they'd be worshiping strange gods. We notice in almost all Catholic art that you'll notice a solar disc behind the head. Here's an example of the nativity scene, and the disc behind Mary's head, which is Semiramis, and the disc behind Jesus' head, who's Tammuz here. And you'll just notice that there is no scriptural backing to be making renditions like this and telling you to put solar discs behind it. The same
even you know that this isn't the right people because of the hand signs that they're using too. They're always making certain gestures, in the artwork. So it's notifying, hey, this is what we're making it appear to be for those who just want to go along with it. But there's a bigger picture behind it.
Always, and they're paying homage to the God that they serve. The hand symbols often as above, so below. You see the same thing used in the Baphomet statue where he's up and down on one side or the other. And so all of this harkens back to the pagan roots, which makes perfect sense. Even when you go into the Vatican today, you'll notice that there are massive statues in the Vatican Museum that are not Christianized. They're just straight up pagan statues that they brought over from the Pantheon. And Greece had the Parthenon, Roman had the Pantheon, and they took those, or Pantheon, excuse me, and they took those statues, and they're in the Vatican Museum, but there's one main statue missing, one main god of that Pantheon missing. It was the statue of Jupiter. And do you remember, we read a quote in the last episode that said Marduk and Baal, they were all associated with the planet Jupiter. And so when we look back into this, and there's people who will say this is not correct, but when you look at the history of it, it is, that this statue was refigured, was taken out of the Pantheon, refigured, and placed here as the statue of Peter. But there's no major secret on who it is because you see, one, the solar disk above his head, and also the symbolism behind him on the wall. You see some fleur-de-lis, you see some other elements. Those are all symbols of Jupiter or Baal.
Yeah.
When you go back and look at it, and again, it's a reproductive, offensive symbol. And people will say, well, how do you know they're worshiping it? If you look at Peter's foot, the toes are gone because it's been rubbed off and worshipped, people bowing at the feet. And it's been intended to be like this because his foot is postured out forward. It's meant to be like basically bow down and kiss my feet. Which, did Jesus ever have that sentiment?
No. There is only one that we're supposed to be giving homage to, and that is God. And the other people are just supposed to be directing us towards God.
And the greatest among you is the servant of all, right? Not, hey, I'm greater than you, bow down and kiss my foot. And we see there's a papal statue too in stone, triple crown tiara with his foot forward. It says basically, pay homage to me. And to go outside, where most people don't realize, when you're in the kind of the main Vatican Square here, that you're standing in the largest solar wheel in the world. And it is kind of dividing the different solstices and equinoxes, and it's all this solar worship. With at the center of this solar wheel is the Egyptian obelisk. Again, another reproductive symbol found throughout history, and it only means one thing. So it's one of those elements. You'll find an obelisk in Washington, D.C., known as the Washington Monument, and also in the city of London. These are all three independent city-states inside of nations. Most people don't realize Washington, D.C. is not technically a part of the 50 states in the United States.
Yeah.
But you'll see that the symbol kind of connects all three of them. And this giant solar wheel kind of acts as this stamp to say, yes, we are in fact honoring the god of the sun. And then the obelisk in the middle of that just shows it's the Egyptian god or the Babylonian god that we've been kind of covering here over the last few episodes.
And one other thing I want to emphasize on here, actually, because you mentioned the obelisk in the center. You have more than one obelisk in Rome. You have the one at the center of the solar disk, but you also have one outside the Jesuit temple, St. John's Lateran, which is the one that was straight from Egypt. And it's very strange that a Catholic organization has all these pagan symbolism, and not only that, they kind of look the same. No, they went to Egypt and took these obelisks and said, there we go, this is perfect. This is exactly what we need, right in the middle of our Christian center. But when you look at this wheel, now we won't get too involved in all of this, but the interesting thing about the solar disk, pointing to the different vernal equinox, is really interesting, because when you look at how God tells time and how the pagans tell time, it's very different. The pagans go by the sun, so it's all the vernal equinox and all these things, and God doesn't do that. He goes by the moon and the days of the week. So it's a totally different structure. And when you get into things like lunar Sabbaths and all these things and calculating different days and going by the equinox, it throws off all of our prophecy, because you're actually using a different reckoning of the calendar, because you're using the sun god version going by the equinoxes instead of the one that God placed, which was going by times and seasons. So it's a totally different structure, even not only in ideology, but even in practical terms, how they judge time. That's why it says that this beast would think to change times and laws. So it's not only God's law, but God's time, everything. That time that he set up to worship him, to rest, to everything, the calendar, there's no limits to what they will change.
Well, and the main calendar the world keeps today is the Gregorian calendar, which is who's Gregory? He's the Pope.
Yep.
And the very calendar itself was put together by an astronomer, a Jesuit, who brought it to Gregory, who then was like, okay, well, this fits this 365 with the leap year and all this. This allows us to hit all of our pagan days. So let's get away with that 30-day and that 360-day setup, and let's fix one that's literally the reason they changed it is so it could fit in their pagan philosophies. So for people wondering today why we have the calendar we have, just know that it harkens back to this pagan priesthood, which is Christianized because Gregory the Pope, so at that time it switched from pagan to papal. And now we're living in a calendar, even the Easter cycle, the December 25th Christmas idea, all of this stuff is checking all the boxes for only pagan ideologies. There isn't an ounce of Christian Bible-based information in there. And so that really blows my mind.
Well, when you look at the week, we said Sunday is the day of the sun, but Monday is the day of the moon, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all those are pagan gods. And on the original changes of the calendar, it was Jupiter Day, which was what we were just talking about, is Jupiter or Peter now that they're referencing. So it's all based on this pagan system that they're trying to infiltrate slowly but surely into the Christian ideology.
And it's worked, right? Because most of the Christian world is following Easter, Christmas, the Sunday ideas. All of this comes from the tradition of the Catholic Church.
Does the Bible say Sunday in the Bible?
The word Sunday does not exist in the Bible. In fact,
not
the only
in the Bible.
relation to the sun that you see is in relation to what we're talking about is this system that don't worship the sun. Don't put your back towards the temple and worship the sun. Don't worship the moon and the stars in the heavens.
According to God, what is Sunday? It's the first day of the week, right? The first day, the second day, the third day, and then the Sabbath. That's how it's structured.
And look, we know they call this seventh day Saturday Saturn Day, and that's pagan. But we're not worshiping on Saturday. We are worshiping on the seventh day. We don't care what you call it. In the pagan structure, the idea is just keeping it simple and following God's word. And I find it interesting that there are 10 commandments. The first 4 are in our relationship with God. The last 6 are in relationship with our fellow man. So if we just isolate the first 4, and actually all 10, there's only one that infers that it's going to be forgotten. The reason it starts with remember. If you wouldn't remember, don't kill people. Remember, honor your mother and father. Remember, don't worship any gods before God. It's the only one that has remember. So it's like when we're talking about deception and we approach people and they're like, nobody cares, God doesn't care about. But yet here we see it's the very deception that no one wants to look at. And the commandment itself says, remember this. It will be a sign between my people and me forever. And so
and there you get a hint to when you're talking about the mark of the beast and the seal of God. He says, this is my sign, right? And I want to emphasize one thing you said, and that was we worship on the 7th day, not on Saturday. That's really important too, because if you change the name of the day, so let's say Wednesday now became Saturday. We're not going to worship God on Wednesday. Just because the name changed. It doesn't matter the name. It matters which day it is. The 7th day.
And anybody who's wondering what the 7th day is, just open your iPhone and hit the calendar. Now I know in Europe and they've changed it in some places, and there's been a couple of things that they've done to try to change it, but I don't think that really sticks because even we see that Satan comes and says, I've changed the day. So most calendars, at least in North America, especially in your iPhones, will still clearly show, and all of history has always shown Sunday's the first day and Saturday's the 7th day. And I remember coming to learn this stuff for the first time, and I'd never looked at a calendar through that lens because my mind was like, it's the weekend. The last day of the weekend is Sunday, so that must be the 7th day. But until you actually look at it, you're like, whoa, wait a second. The week starts on the day of the sun. It really starts to, at least for me at the time when I was first coming to understand this stuff, that it really was like, wow, okay. Even something as simple as that, I didn't realize. But now I want to go through a document that we referenced last time, we kind of teased, which was about Rome's position on this whole Saturday, Sunday issue. And, you can find tons of quotes from the Catholic Church about how Sunday is their act and their mark. But the language and the boldness that the papacy works with is so startling that this is the first of 4 articles that were written in response to something that the Supreme Court did. So in 1892, the Supreme Court, through a decision, decided to label America a Christian nation. And here we are in 2023, and there's a battle going on in the States on a small group of people. I say they're small now, but they're going to continue to grow as things get closer, wanting to label America a Christian nation. And a huge contingent of people, secularists for the most part, not wanting to do this. What many don't realize is the Supreme Court has already labeled the United States a Christian nation in this 1892 decision. And so when that happened, the Adventists wrote a response to this ruling. And it was a response called Appeal and Remonstrance, where they were basically trying to tell the American public that even though we're Christians, you can't label the nation a Christian nation, because in doing so, when you do, you have now opened the door for religious liberty issues, liberty of conscience issues, and basically running the same track that Rome ran when it was in charge for over 1,000 years. And it's one of these things that allows us to clearly define what this pagan Roman priesthood, that's known as Papal Rome today, feels about this, because they responded to what the Adventists wrote. And they wrote 4 articles written from the Catholic Mirror. And the Catholic Mirror is still around today. It's a publication, a magazine, and it acts as the voice box for the papacy and the archdiocese of the United States. The Archbishop of New York, I think at this time, will use this to express views of the papacy without having to come out with an encyclical or a formal, Catholic doctrine to offset this. So we're going to read the first of these 4 articles, and we're just going to kind of comment on it as we read through it, and this is verbatim what was written at the time. Nothing has been altered or changed, and I hope people who see this that are still keeping Sunday will really pay attention, because it is an absolutely eye-opening record of what they see on this. So let's start reading this document and start picking through it. It says, "Our attention has been called to the above subject in the past week by the receipt of a brochure of 21 pages published by the International Religious Liberty Association entitled Appeal and Remonstrance." So the Adventists wrote it and had sent it out a few places, but it was this International Religious Liberty Association that really sent it all over the country. And this is what allowed the papacy to get it, read it, and start responding. So it embodied resolutions adopted by the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists. The resolutions criticize and censure with much acerbity the actions of the United States Congress and the Supreme Court for invading the rights of the people by closing the World's Fair on Sunday. And so that was the hot topic at the time. Would the World's Fair be open and Protestants were pounding, saying, no, you can't be open on Sunday.
I just want to make one more comment. And that is, because of this Sunday issue with the World's Fair, they had to make a definition of, because they were legalizing this, closing on Sunday, and they were saying it's a Christian nation, they had to give a definition of what the day the Sabbath was. So because of that, in actual U.S. Legal documents, when they use the word Sabbath, it refers to the first day of the week. So they changed that from meaning the seventh day. They said, no, we're going to determine that the Sabbath is actually the first day of the week when we're referencing it, because that's the day that we consider to be the Sabbath day.
And that matches up with only one organization. Not the Bible, but with the papacy. So let's continue. It says the Adventists are the only body of Christians with the Bible as their teacher. Now, did Adventists write this, or did the papacy write this?
No, this is the Catholic Mirror.
This is literally the voice box of the Catholic Church in the America in the late 1800s. So the Adventists are the only body of Christians with the Bible their teacher who can find no warrant in its pages for the change of the day from the 7th to the 1st, hence their appellation, Seventh-day Adventists. Their cardinal principle consists in setting apart Saturday for the exclusive worship of God, in conformity with the positive command of God himself, repeatedly reiterated in the sacred books of the Old and New Testaments, literally obeyed by the children of Israel for thousands of years to this day, and endorsed by the teaching and practice of the Son of God while on earth.
Okay, that is a mouthful right there. And that is, I mean, they're saying Old and New Testament, the Son of God whilst on earth still promoted that. Yeah. And all the sacred books and the seventh day, hence Seventh-day Adventist. Yeah. It doesn't say Saturday Adventist, by the way. It says Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah.
And they are just blatantly saying this is biblical as biblical can get.
And Protestant Christians today will say the New Testament doesn't uplift the Jewish Sabbath. Here they're saying not only is it the Old and New Testaments, from beginning to end is the seventh day of the Sabbath of the Bible, but it also says the Son of God practiced it the entire time he was here on earth.
Yep.
So at what point was it changed? Jesus didn't do it when he was here, and God has said from the beginning that this is his holy day. So we're seeing from the priests of the sun god, they're telling you here, okay, we know the difference, we see the difference, and there is one body in the world that is actually keeping the Bible-prescribed Sabbath. Let's keep going. Per contra, the Protestants of the world, the Adventists accepted, with the same Bible as their cherished and sole infallible teacher, by their practice, since their appearance in the 16th century, with the time-honored practice of the Jewish people before their eyes, have rejected the day named for his worship by God and assumed, in apparent contradiction of his command, a day for his worship never once referred to for that purpose in the pages of that sacred volume. So they're acknowledging there is not a single reference to first day worship as the Sabbath in the Bible. They know this. Mm-hmm. The average, remember the things that we said, I think maybe in the last episode, we acknowledged like Protestants say that the Sabbath was changed to acknowledge the resurrection and the Lord's Day and all this stuff. Here they're saying, you don't even really understand, Protestants, because there is not a single reference of first day as Sabbath worship in the Bible. Doesn't matter if the apostles gathered on the first day. There's no warrant for it. They know this. But the average Protestant is using a reason for their worship that doesn't even exist in the Bible. And the pagan sun-worshiping priesthood knows this. So let's continue. What Protestant pulpit does not ring almost every Sunday with loud, impassioned incentives against Sabbath violations? Who can forget the fanatical clamor of the Protestant ministers throughout the length and breadth of the land against opening the gates of the World's Fair on Sunday? The thousands of petitions signed by millions to save the Lord's Day from desecration. We're going to tackle the Lord's Day one in another episode. Surely such general and widespread excitement and noisy remonstrance could not have existed without the strongest grounds for such animated protests. So they're saying they must have grounds for their impassioned reasons to protect Sunday. And when quarters were assigned at the World's Fair to the various sects of Protestantism for the exhibition of articles, who can forget the emphatic expression of virtuous and conscientious indignation exhibited by our Presbyterian brethren, as soon as they learned of the decision of the Supreme Court not to interfere in the Sunday opening? The newspapers informed us that they flatly refused to utilize the space accorded to them or open their boxes, demanding the right to withdraw the articles in rigid adherence to their principles, and thus decline all contact with sacrilegious and Sabbath-breaking exhibitions. Okay? Doubtless, our Calvinist brethren deserved and shared the sympathy of all other sects who, however, lost the opportunity of posing as martyrs in vindication of Sabbath observance. They thus became a spectacle to the world, to angels and to men, although their Protestant brethren, who failed to share the monopoly were uncharitably and enviously disposed to attribute their steadfast adherence to religious principles, to pharisaical pride and dogged obstinacy. Our purpose in throwing off this article is to shed such light on this all-important question. For were the Sabbath question to be removed from the Protestant pulpits, the sects would feel lost, the preachers would be deprived of their Cheshire cheese, meaning they were fervent in defending this, that our readers may be able to comprehend the question in all its bearings and thus reach a clear conviction. Okay, now here it gets really interesting. The Christian world is, morally speaking, united on the question and practice of worshiping God on the first day of the week. The Israelites, scattered all over the earth, keep the last day of the week sacred to the worship of the deity. In the particular, the Seventh-day Adventists have also selected the same day. The Israelites and Adventists both appeal to the Bible for the divine command, persistently obliging the strict observance of Saturday, the seventh day. The Israelite respects the authority of the Old Testament only, but the Adventist, who is a Christian, accepts the New Testament on the same grounds as the Old, an inspired record also. He finds that the Bible, his teacher, is consistent in both parts. Agreed that the Redeemer, during his mortal life, never kept any other day than Saturday. Not once. Never once did he ever keep anything other than Saturday as Sabbath. The Gospels plainly evince to him this fact. While in the pages of the Acts of the Apostles, the Epistles, and the Apocalypse, not the vestige of an act canceling Saturday arrangement can be found. So it's saying, because most Protestants are saying the New Testament got rid of the Jewish Sabbath. We hear Pope Francis constantly talking about the Jewish Sabbath.
Yep.
And here, from the papacy's own mouth, it says there is no scripture that cancels the seventh-day Sabbath.
After Jesus.
Yep.
Even in Acts of the Apostles and the Apocalypse, which is Revelation.
Exactly. So we're seeing in the epistles, all the letters to the churches, that through the entirety of the record, even after Jesus, not a single other day was kept as the Sabbath, but the seventh day. And they know this. Why don't our Protestant brothers and sisters understand this issue? Let's continue. The Adventists, therefore, in common with the Israelites, derive their belief from the Old Testament, which position is confirmed by the New Testament, endorsing fully by the life and practice of the Redeemer, Jesus, and his apostles, the teaching of the sacred word for nearly a century of the Christian era.
Yep. So, and you see here that they're saying for a century past, right? Because obviously once Jesus went back to heaven, the apostles kept going and kept preaching for decades, right? Mm-hmm. And it's saying here, they never changed. They never started worshiping on Sunday. It doesn't matter how you want to try and work it into the text. All historical data shows that they didn't change. Mm-hmm. And they're just saying it outright.
Yeah, and it's strange to me how the Protestant today can say that Sunday is something that is biblically held, when not only the Bible doesn't say it, but the one who invented Sunday as a Christian thing is also saying it's not in there. So where did this come from? Yep. And we'll look a little bit about where that comes from in another day, because we see around the first century after it crept in through a guy named Justin Martyr, which we're not going to get in this episode, but we'll touch on later, which also allowed the confusion to happen on the Lord's Day issue. So not being the Sabbath, but on Sunday, when the Lord's Day, we can clearly show and prove that is the Sabbath. So when John was taken in spirit on the Lord's Day in Revelation, it was on the seventh day. So let's continue. Numerically considered, the Seventh-day Adventists form an insignificant portion of the Protestant population of the earth, but as the question is not of one of numbers, but of truth. And when we talk about a remnant, right?
Yep.
Small, what's left over. And I think even in some of the comments of our videos, people are like, remnant doesn't necessarily mean small. Go look up the definition of remnant.
Is what's left over.
What's left over, yeah. And
the original word remnant comes from like a cloth roll.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have a huge roll at the start, and you use up all the fabric. And the thing with the remnant It's the last revolutions around the spool, and that cloth will actually have the imprint of the spool on it. So it's interesting because that means that remnant is holding on to what was actually the foundation there, which is Christ and which is the sacred word, the Holy Bible, is imprinted onto that remnant. Mm-hmm. And the farther out you get, the farther you get from what the original was.
Yep, and we see in Revelation 12:17, I think it is, that the dragon, Satan, is angry with the woman. And the man of sin, or the lawless one, is like the head of Satan's kingdom.
Yep.
And the dragon hates the church, the woman, and the lawless one is defined by breaking and changing the law. But then after that, it says, it defines who is the church, those who keep the commandments and have the testimony, and we see it in other parts of the faith of Jesus. So when we talk about the law, we're not, as Adventists, trying to be legalists and say, well, the law stands because we're going to earn our salvation by our works. No, we see the Bible is defining it as there's a group that disregard the law, and it lumps Satan and the man of sin and everyone under this mystery Babylon system as lawbreakers. And then here, everyone who doesn't believe this, go to Revelation 12:17 and read that the defining attribute, one of them, is this keeping of the law. And it's not because we do it to be saved, it's because we show it as an expression of the kingdom we serve, and we try to get closer to Christ through sanctification to keep the law as often as we're able, and when we fall, we have an advocate in the heavenly courts in Jesus Christ the righteous, our high priest, which is what the whole book of Hebrews talks about.
Because we are the ones who needs to change, not God.
Right.
He's the one who makes the law, and we try and follow that law, not us decide, oh, we like to worship on Sunday better. God's just going to have to be okay with that. No, that's not really how that works.
Right. And I honestly, and I say this with all respect, it's the absolutely most lazy excuse to call keeping God's law legalism. Mm-hmm. Is there legalism? Absolutely. Look at Orthodox Judaism, where they are literally trying to earn their way to heaven. And you see all of the forms and customs, even procreating through, strange means, so that they can see themselves as righteous and ritually pure by the works of their keeping the law. That is not what we're advocating. There's a difference between trying to represent the king in the kingdom that you say you love and you want to be like and spend all of eternity with, where that law will still exist there, and doing these things because you're trying to earn your way into heaven.
Right.
We're simply just an expression of our Savior's character is revealed through this law of liberty, this law of justice, this law of happiness. Like, it sets you free the more we keep the law. And when we fall, we have our advocate. But when Jesus talks, he says, go, your sins be forgiven, go and sin no more. Yeah. He doesn't say, your sins be forgiven, I got all your future ones, go have a ball, do whatever you want. He's specifically saying, okay, you've been forgiven. Now don't go break the law anymore, because the sin is the transgression of the law. So no matter how we dice it, the Bible puts the law at the center of all of this stuff in our relationship with it. So legalism, while being a valid thing, to call an Adventist a legalist is about as short-sighted as one can be when trying to give an intellectual argument. Now, if we want to discuss other things.
Even the definition of legalism itself is just keeping the law.
Yeah.
Right, which is, I don't think you could argue, a bad thing.
Right. But if you're doing it to obtain salvation by keeping it, then it is a bad thing.
Sure.
Then it starts to fall apart because the works of our own hands, they're filthy rags before God. All right, so sorry for that tangent, but it's really important because how often do we hear that legalist angle? And even in the comments after we explain that this is not about keeping it for our righteousness.
If we're not supposed to be law keepers, then why can we not kill, not lie, not steal, not commit adultery?
Yeah.
There's a whole host. Now, some people do say, oh, well, yeah, killing obviously is bad, but a white lie, we even call it a white lie. Mm-hmm. Any form of breaking any one of the commandments is like breaking them all, the Bible says.
Exactly, and that's why we need an advocate. We need a high priest, because as you walk, you hear almost no churches talk about sanctification these days. It talk about justification, which is I agree, I accept Jesus.
The righteousness by faith.
Yeah, we totally are okay with that. And we're okay with glorification, meaning like when God comes and we are translated or raised in the resurrection, we're okay with that. But the sanctification part, most of Protestant world hates and says not only are the commandments nailed to the cross, but that they're impossible to keep, both of which are Satan's angles.
Yeah.
Because he had that same angle. Well, you can't keep this.
Yeah.
And that's when Jesus came and walked. And then in 1 Peter, he talks about walking in the light you've been given, walking as Jesus walked, walking in accordance with the law of liberty. So like the New Testament is littered with examples saying, if you love me, keep my commandments. Mm-hmm. And then we'll get into the next episode. I'm going to get too far off here, but I hope the point has been made that there's a difference and that the papacy can tell the difference, and they've singled out Adventists specifically as the only denomination that has the Bible as their teacher. And I think there's been some that's popped up since, like the Seventh-day Baptists and even the Church of God Seventh Day. I think those are the three out of 33,000 denominations of Christianity. Those are the three that take the seventh day. And those two we could do a whole thing on about, the differences there. Okay, so let's pick up where we are left off. But as the question is not one of numbers, but of truth, fact, and right, a strict sense of justice forbids the condemnation of this little sect without a calm and unbiased investigation. Is this a hint that the investigation and consequent condemnation of the Seventh-day Adventists will be duly carried into effect by Rome as soon as this calm and unbiased investigation shall be completed with the Protestants with whom she's now dealing? So this is in reference that the appeals and remonstrance that the Adventists wrote was like kind of doing what Jeremiah did to the ancient Israelites, saying, you guys can't do this.
Yep.
And kind of snap out of it, this seventh day thing is going to be a snare for you. Mm-hmm. And so they're saying, is the Protestant world going to be against the Seventh-day Adventists for this? The Protestant world has been, from its infancy in the 16th century, in thorough accord with the Catholic Church. Do you think Protestants of the Reformation would know, they worked so hard to separate themselves, and here they're saying, since its infancy, they have been in accord with the Catholic Church. Yep. Over what? It says, in keeping holy, not Saturday, but Sunday. The entire time, the Catholic Church has known that this little snare of Sunday is what keeps Protestants under the umbrella of Rome, whether they know it, like it, or not.
You don't always have to know you're deceived to be deceived.
Most people don't.
That's why it's a deception.
Exactly. And it's still striking to me that you bring this up to most people, Christian or not, and they're just like, why do you care about a day? Who cares about a day? And here, that's the nature of the deception. Mm-hmm. That's the part of the problem. The discussion of the grounds that led to this unanimity of sentiment and practice for over 300 years, so they united on this for 300 years, must help toward placing Protestantism on a solid basis in this particular, should the arguments in favor if this position overcome those furnished by the Israelites and Adventists, the Bible, the sole recognized teacher of both litigants, being the umpire and witness. So here it's just saying the Israelites and the Adventists are the only two at this time that were seeing this distinguishing mark or difference between the two.
It said for the last 300 years. Why 300 years? Well, they started separating in the 1500s when all the reformers started saying, hey, there's certain things that are anti-biblical, and they separated, but a lot of them, because the reformers died or they're burned at the stake and they didn't progress past some of these things, and one of those things was Sunday that they held on to. Mm-hmm. That was a tradition of the Catholic Church. And so they kept that for the last 300 years. So that's why it referenced 300 years, because that's when all the churches started. We had basically two groups of Bible believers. We had Catholics, and then we had people who actually believed the Bible. Over all the centuries, God has always had a people that kept the Sabbath and kept and believed the true Bible principles. Mm-hmm. And then when these people started coming out and realizing things, they unfortunately held on to some of those practices still.
And actually, Martin Luther was challenged in, I think it was the Council of Trent, maybe, that they were saying, you guys say sola scriptura, and you're making all this noise over sola scriptura, but you still keep Sunday. And it was the one point that Martin Luther just like couldn't debate on. It was like what was hanging over most of the Reformation when they conceded on indulgences and infant baptisms and all of this other pagan stuff that's found in there that the Reformers were talking about. But the Sunday issue, they said, okay, well, if you're really sola scriptura, why are you keeping Sunday? And yet that part of the Reformation never occurred until later in America. Let's continue reading. If, however, on the other hand, the latter furnishes arguments, incontrovertible by the great mass of Protestants, both classes of litigants, appealing to their common teacher, the Bible, the great body of Protestants, so far from clamoring, as they do with vigorous pertinacity, from the strict keeping of Sunday, have no other recourse left than the admission that they have been teaching and practicing what is scripturally false for over 3 centuries by adopting the teaching and practice of what they have always pretended to believe, an apostate church, contrary to every warrant and teaching of the sacred scripture.
Wow.
That's about as clear as it gets. They have been following a false teaching for over 300 years.
Yeah.
Let's continue. To add to the intensity of this scriptural and unpardonable blunder, it involves one of the most positive and emphatic commands of God to his servants, man. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
That's just amazing that they even say it as one of the most positive and emphatic commands of God to his servant man. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. They're even pointing out that it was very important what God was trying to say.
So important that he put it as the 4th and final commandment in relation to God and our relationship with him. So important that it says remember, it's because he knew it was going to be forgotten. And this system has replaced it with this worship of the sun. It's as clear as day for anyone who's willing to remove the biases and blinders and say, let's just take Adventism out of it. Let's just make it a seventh-day, first-day issue and leave all of the rest of the doctrines out of it. It is so clear that if you follow the Bible, that you need to be acknowledging and worshiping on God's holy day. Now, that doesn't mean don't worship on Sunday. Feel free to worship on Sunday, but worship God as God prescribes on the Sabbath as he has commanded. That's the whole idea here. Okay, let's continue. No Protestant living today has ever yet obeyed that command. Can you believe that? No Protestant living today has ever yet obeyed that command, preferring to follow the apostate church referred to than his teacher, the Bible, which, from Genesis to Revelation, teaches no other doctrine should the Israelites and the Seventh-day Adventists be correct. Wow. Both sides appeal to the Bible as their infallible teacher. Let the Bible decide whether Saturday or Sunday be the day enjoined by God.
It even references itself as the apostate church.
Exactly.
Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church knows who they are. Right. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They know that they are the woman with the golden cup in Revelation because right outside of St. Peter's Basilica and in all the other buildings around, they represent themselves by a woman with a golden cup stepping on the Bible and
stepping on Protestants and
unbelievable.
Gosh, there's all sorts of stuff with Ignatius Loyola crushing, Protestants' heads, and so that's why we encourage Catholics who watch this and think we're nuts or whatever. Go talk to your priest. Ask him about this seventh-day, first-day issue. Ask him which one is uplifted by the Bible and which one's uplifted by the church.
You could go to the book of Revelation, go to the Vatican, and just walk through the Vatican, look at something, find in Revelation, keep walking, look at it, it's in Revelation, and you're going to see the whole picture just unfold right there and not need any extra explanation because it's just the Catholic Church is the queen of symbols. They use symbols everywhere. And all those symbols in the Bible are just laid out nice and plain for us all throughout the Vatican structure.
Yeah. And so we can go and see what the source is. And I want to make it clear that we're not calling everyone inside the Catholic Church evil. The whole point of this program is because truth matters.
Yep.
If you want to know the truth and you want to live by the scriptures, by the word alone, by God's word, we're simply pointing out the means by which this deceptive system has drawn in most of the Christian world. And when Satan does his false second coming thing, the whole world will at that point be Christianized. And they will all be united under this day. Now we can start to see why the day becomes such an issue, such a dividing issue, that it means literally the mark of the beast versus the seal of God.
Yep.
Let's continue. One of the two bodies must be wrong. And whereas a false position on this all-important question, so does the Catholic Church know that this is an important question?
Yes, all important.
Totally. All-important question involves terrible penalties threatened by God himself against the transgressor of this, quote, perpetual covenant. So even they acknowledge it's meant not for an ancient Israelite, it's meant from Genesis to Revelation, from the beginning of creation to the restoration of Eden.
That's what the whole thing was about.
Yeah.
The whole reason that the Israelites went into captivity into the pagan nations is because they broke the covenant. And the covenant was based on the center point being the Sabbath.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the way that Israel distinguished itself from all the other pagan cultures was that it had this Sabbath day, and it stood out from the rest of the world. And while the rest of the Christian world's trying to fit in, here, Adventism is trying to stand out, like ancient Israel did. And do we have a perfect relationship with God? No. We go like this too, unfortunately. And it's about the individual heart and mind. We're not saying if you join Adventism, you're instantly saved, good, everything's done. No. It's an individual heart and mind, just like there were people in the Israelite faith in ancient Israel that just because they were Jews didn't mean they were saved. 25 of his priests with their back to the temple worshiping the sun. So this is an individual heart and mind decision. But if you do, the knowable, joinable place where the truth is, regardless of where it is within the walk with God, is the remnant church, the Seventh-day Adventist church today. And this was a hard thing for me to accept, but after a while, regardless of what the truth is, if you're really interested in it, you have to go wherever it leads.
Yep.
Okay, so let's continue. So it talked about the perpetual covenant, so they know that it's supposed to go from beginning to end. It says, we shall enter on the discussion of the merits of the argument wielded by both sides. Neither is the discussion of this paramount subject above the capacity of ordinary minds. I mean, we can understand it, nor does it involve extraordinary study. You don't have to go super deep to find it. It resolves itself into a few plain questions, easy of solution. Question 1, which day of the week does the Bible enjoin to be kept holy? Seventh day. Has the New Testament modified by precept or practice the original command? No. And I'm not saying this between Matt and Mackenzie. I'm just referencing how this first article document has answered these questions. We didn't answer them. They had said, God said the seventh day holy. They said there has been no modification from it in the New Testament. And the third question, have Protestants since the 16th century obeyed the command of God by keeping holy the day enjoined by the infallible guide and teacher, the Bible? No, they haven't obeyed it. And they even said no Protestant ever has kept this command unless, of course, they were in one of the Israelites or the Adventist camp. And if not, why not? To the above three questions, we pledge ourselves to furnish as many answers which cannot fail to vindicate the truth and uphold the deformity of error. It almost feels like Adventists wrote this document in a way when you read certain parts of it, right?
Yep.
Because it's so clear that this apostate church has entered this false substitute of a day and then acknowledges that anybody who keeps this day is not following the Bible nor God's commands, even with all the punishments that come along with the breaking of this as stated in the Bible.
The sad thing, though, is the reason they are so adamant about stating and proving that this is anti-biblical is so they can take the authority.
Exactly.
So they can say, you know what? This is against God's command. This is against the Bible. And you know why that's okay? Because we're actually higher than God.
That's right. And we have how many encyclicals and papal statements and the popes themselves saying ad nauseum that they are above tradition, they're above the Bible, they can change the word. The priests are obligated to, or the God's obligated to do what the priests say. I mean, we could go down the laundry list, but we're going to read just a few more just to seal this whole issue up from the position of the Catholic Church. It says, the Catholic Church changed the observance of the Sabbath to Sunday by right of the divine, infallible authority given to her by her founder, Jesus Christ. So here, the whole Old Testament, all of Jesus' ministry, all the apostles keep it. And they're saying, well, our divine, infallible teacher, Jesus, changed it. But he never changed it.
Yep.
He always practiced it. Even in the resurrection, death and resurrection, he kept it.
Yep.
Okay, continuing. The Protestant claiming the Bible to be the only guide of faith has no warrant for observing Sunday. In this matter, the Seventh-day Adventist is the only consistent Protestant. And I did not just handpick all the ones that said Adventists are great. I'm just showing that the papacy understands the contrast between these two systems, and that the starkness, the dividing line seems to be between everybody and the Adventists.
And they know that. And that's kind of like later on when we keep going down the layers, they know that the main issue is the Adventists, because the Adventists are the ones that have a totally different ideology. The others claim to be Bible followers, but in the background, like they're saying, they're actually the children of Rome, the daughters of the Great Mother.
Exactly.
But these Seventh-day Adventists, they're a whole different woman altogether.
Exactly. And so when we see described in Revelation, Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, in order to be a mother, you have to have children.
Yep.
And these are the daughters, the Protestant denominations around the world. And she says the way, and I have a whole sermon that I give on this, that says the way that you can tell I am the Mother Church, the Holy Roman Mother Church, and the way that you know that you are under my authority is because you keep my day.
Yep.
That's the way you know. And if you don't, then you're not under my authority and you're using the Bible as your teacher. And we're seeing that this is consistent through all of these quotes. Here's another one. They, the Protestants, deem it their duty to keep the Sunday holy. Why? Because the Catholic Church tells them to do so. They have no other reason. The observance of Sunday thus comes to be an ecclesiastical law entirely distinct from the divine law of the Sabbath observance. The author of Sunday law is the Catholic Church. I mean, does it get more clear than that?
No.
Distinctly separate and different. When we read Satan's going to come and tell everyone to change the day and to keep Sunday holy, it's distinct and separate totally, because you're choosing between these two contrasting systems. And we saw in the first slide of the last episode, everyone is going to have to make a choice. There's no sitting on the sidelines for this.
Yep.
Here's a few more. Not the creator of the universe in Genesis 2, verses 1 through 3, but the Catholic Church can claim the honor of having granted man a pause to his work every 7 days. So there you go, creator of the universe.
Yep.
We are over you. Here's another. Of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change was her act. And the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters. I mean, we can see clearly that they know what's going on here.
Yep.
They know this is her mark. They know this will end up being the mark of the beast. And we're actually going to look at this UN mural at some point to decode that this plan has been in place, and these people, the United Nations, the United people, certain people in the inner circles around the world absolutely know that this is the plan and that this is going to be one of the issues.
And we don't even have to guess what the mark of the beast is. They're saying right here, this is the mark.
This is our mark. And time again, we could read 100 more pages worth of stuff that the narrative is not going to change. And again, we're not attacking Protestants who keep Sunday. We're attacking the institution of Sunday itself and saying, Protestants, come out and really have sola scriptura. Really follow God and have him be happy with your following the instruction manual that he gave us, and not this other false system that has caused problems since basically going back to Eden. Here's another. Sunday is purely a creation of the Catholic Church. Sunday, it is a law of the Catholic Church alone. So I think we're getting the point here.
Yeah.
And I just want to go look at this Genesis 2 record and say, what did God do on the seventh day? And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his works which he made. We have nothing to do with this. This is not up to us.
Yep.
It says, and God blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified it, because that in it he rested from all his works which God created and made.
So question. If God makes something, and what's the sanctified mean?
Making holy, the process
holy,
of making
right?
holy.
So if God makes something holy, can you unholify it?
Yeah.
He doesn't make things that can become unholy.
Right.
The covenant that he gave to Israel, that was a holy covenant. Who broke the covenant?
Israel.
Israel broke the covenant. But did that mean that the covenant was now unholy? No. Right. The covenant was still binding.
Yeah.
And he said then, okay, I will give you a new covenant. But it's no different than the old one because I can't change it. It's still the same holy covenant.
It's the same.
But this time, instead of giving you physical tablets of stone, I'm going to write it on your heart.
Right.
But it has the same purpose. In Paul's writings, it says that the covenant is there for the perfecting of the saints. That's to make one holy. And it's the same thing. If he sanctified the seventh day and hallowed it, then how are we to say that it's now unholy?
We can't, because it's not up to us. And this is where the confusion, I feel like people are talking about how, we're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. That's great. I'm all for it. But what does this say? We are celebrating all of God's works which he created and made. We're celebrating creation and God the Creator, and here you're celebrating resurrection of Jesus.
Should we celebrate the death and keep Friday?
Yeah.
Should we celebrate,
his baptism? We could celebrate when he was anointed. We could celebrate when he was born. Like all of these things could be a remembrance of, and they're all things worthy to be remembered, but none of them replace something that God set aside for the purpose of a memorial throughout creation. And there's maybe Jews watching that are saying, oh, well, I'm good because I'm keeping the Sabbath. We got the Sabbath. We're the ancient Israelites. Well, go read Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, because unfortunately that represents the conditions that needed to be met by the end of this 70-week prophecy. And if there are Jewish people out there, you should know what the 70-week prophecy is. You should know what the conditions were to anoint the most holy, to get rid of sin, to do all of these things. Otherwise, the gospel goes to the whole world.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And so if you're in Judaism, even if you're a Messianic Jew, don't stop there, because there is more to the story. You have to keep going. Judaism, and I say this with all respect in the world, them as God's chosen people ended at the end of that 70 weeks. Yeah. And I know there's people who say that the 70 week hasn't happened yet, but it did. And all of it played out, and the conditions weren't met. At the stoning of Stephen, it was over. That was the end of the 70th week. And the gospel went to the Gentiles. And then you see the 7 church ages, as in Revelation, going through and identifying what happened after Christ's death through these 7 ages. Like, there's so much to uncover that whether you're Catholic or Jewish, come out of these systems.
And why is it important to say that? Because the Sabbath is the foundation. It is the centerpiece. And on that, many other things are built.
Right. So
you can't just say, well, I keep the Sabbath, but nothing else that's in the Bible.
Right.
We have to, if we're Bible-believing Christians, the Sabbath is what makes that structure work. And then we have to follow all the other things that apply in there. So we can't just say, okay, well, I'll sit on my couch on Sabbath, but then not understand the proper fulfillment of all of these other types and antitypes, and deny the rest of the things that are happening in Scripture and the things that we need to be considering right now. Mm-hmm. Because it's the whole that we need to understand. But the main points that are going to be controverted, especially right now, is this point, because it is the defining line between this papal structure and between the heavenly structure.
And we said, I think, at the start of the last episode, we want to help people distinguish between what is holy and what is not holy. And again, it's not Matt McKenzie defining what is holy and what is not holy. Let's just let God define what is holy and what is not holy. So we're going to wrap this up by looking at what we've found over the last 2 episodes. We found that the Ezekiel record clearly shows the worst abomination in God's eyes is the worship of the sun and all that it entails, because it takes all these titles and rights of God and places them somewhere else. And we see that it went down, just like in Daniel, we saw the man of metals. It goes down from Babylon through to Medo-Persia, into Greece, into Rome, into the Little Horn papacy, and now into the daughters of the Protestant denominations. It has literally flowed through time, just as God described from Daniel, from the head down to the toes of metal, of clay and iron.
Now, that's getting into a whole nother study, going through Daniel and all the symbols and types. But if you see on our wall behind Matt, we have that lion from Babylon over there, because that is one of the sequence in prophecy. Is actually, the Bible shows how Medo-Persia was to be the world power, and then Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, then Rome, then the papacy, and going all the way down, and even foretelling that the United States would be in power. All these things is in Daniel and Revelation. And once you start understanding all these pieces, and you understand the severity of this sun worship or this Sunday worship in place of God's law, and the mark of the beast and the seal of God, and all these pieces start coming together, then you start to see the mosaic of, oh wow, this is really what has been taking place for 6,000 years, from the Garden of Eden going all the way through to our day, which is basically the culmination of it all.
It's exactly right, and it's what the scripture says was going to happen. And so, as we saw in the last episode, that all these attributes, it's the worship of the S-U-N, not the S-O-N.
Yep.
It's claims of being the source of creation, claims of being source of all life, claims to see all things, claims of source of truth and justice, found in all the ancient cultures, and it's always associated with the first day of the week. So to answer the question, why does God hate sun worship so much? It breaks all 4 of the first commandments and embodies the totality of this apostate system that we've been battling, the world he's been battling since the beginning. The worship of the sun and the worship of Tammuz is breaking the first commandment, no gods before God. The worship of the sun as an object is idol worship. Claiming that the God's day of rest in God's name as the first day is blaspheming God's name. And the 4th one is clearly the one that's under the attack the most, because the sun, God, always takes the title of creator of all things. And here it breaks the 4th commandment by removing God as creator, and even the papacy changing the Sabbath and getting rid of the 2nd commandment. I mean, there is no greater abomination than the worship of the sun. It's exactly as was found in the Ezekiel record. So, brother, I hope we were able to be clear enough to show that we are not judging people. I know for myself, not being raised Adventist, I had to come out of this same thing. I had to also come head to head with these things. My families were Sunday keepers. You know, my friends and people who were Christian were all Sunday keepers. This is not to say that if you worship on Sunday that you're somehow on Satan's side. You can love Jesus with all your heart and serve him, and he can see the difference. But once you know, you can't reject the truth, because if you do, you are now choosing your side. And we know Jesus said, you forsake all and follow me, whether that's husband, wife, brother, sister, mother, father. If it means separating for the truth's sake, then that's what needs to be done. And Christ sacrificed so much so that we could know the truth and live, that when we are presented with the truth and we reject it, we are rejecting Jesus.
Yeah, we are rejecting the God of creation, the one who gave us life. So that's why it's so paramount, all these things that we're talking about here, And especially going into some of the later episodes where we're going to be really dissecting even more the application that we're going to be facing soon in a country near you. These are going to be real things. And it seems kind of far-fetched because we haven't seen this sort of thing take place really in the last few years. It seems more of like a historical thing to be enforcing religious laws.
Right.
Especially in, Canada and North America. But this is on the books. It is in place. It just needs the right climate in order to sprout that seed and get it really growing.
And we're actually going to look at another document straight from the Jesuit order, claiming that Sunday Sabbath is a universal human right.
Yep.
And so we're going to go, because we don't want people to just take our words for it. We presented a pretty good body of evidence to support our arguments, but I want to take it one step further and show people how they're going to frame this coming Sunday worship aspect. Now, we know it's not going to happen naturally or organically. It's going to get supernatural help in the form of this false Holy Spirit movement and miracles and Satan appearing. But the framework for it, through the eyes and lens of the Jesuits, show you that they have had a plan to set up Sunday as a universal human right. And here we are today talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and the 17 aspects of that. And all of this stems from the papacy. Yep. And the whole point of a lot of this is control, but really to get Sunday as this piece. And you can see Sunday movements from a secular standpoint happening all over the world right now. So all the pieces are being put into place to exalt this final piece. And we have a document that lays out in pretty great detail exactly how they view it and how they're going to use these things to be different than the blue laws that we saw. Now it will be a slightly different measure and something that I think our audience will really find fascinating.
And with that thought, we're going to close out. But I want to remind you guys to go to adtv.watch. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because we can create the content and the Lord helps us to put this together, but we need each one of your help to share the content with others. Get studying yourself. Be able to give them Bible study. Talk to them about these subjects so that more and more people are armed with the sword of the Spirit, with the Bible, and can give these to their friends and to their family and anybody that they come in contact with.
And I'll just say, the biggest thing that can help us is the easiest thing for you guys to do. For the YouTube algorithm, clicking that like button and commenting makes a world of difference. So play out your role in helping this information spread just by that simple click. We have sometimes, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100,000 people watch, and only like 10% click the like button or comment. But you don't realize how impactful you can be to somebody you may not even know who's now being recommended this stuff because you clicked that one button or left a couple comments. So it really does help us.
Yeah. And we're always looking for more talent. I wanted to emphasize that as well. So editors, if you're an editor, if you're a motion graphic designer, if you're in marketing, if you're in, all the different departments that you can think of, we need help. We're a small team. We go with the Spirit of God and put our best effort together. But we're always looking for extra help. So if you have that, you can send in your resume to client-care@amazingdiscoveries.org. We're always looking for more people in the video editing team, especially to try and get the content out faster. We need more hands involved.
Yep. And it's a blessing, and thank God for our existing team here who just go above and beyond to get everything done. So God bless them, and God bless all of you for helping us share this information.
Thank you, and we will see you next time.